Hello and welcome to the American Peloton. I am Jonathan Crane. I'm a mediocre Cat 2 cyclist out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And I'm Ben. I am a former elite mountain biker, current head coach at Skyway Cycling, and team director at Skyway Domestique. I did want to take a second before we get started
Oh,
to
yeah.
show off our 2023 team kit. Um, my co-director Rob Liao absolutely killed this design. Cool. Shout out to Classic Cycling for making this for us. Really cool, high quality kit at a
Yeah.
really affordable price. So if you're interested in custom team kit or just kit in general, definitely look at them in the future.
I just did my second hour outside since the string of injuries I've had in the new skin suit, and I'm really psyched on it. I also put out a video on the YouTube channel on Monday about pinning numbers to race faster because everyone's numbers are always pinned like a giant sail. So that was like the thing I observed at the first couple races of the year that I was like, yeah, that's low hanging fruit in terms of free speed for most people. So if you want to get a good up close look at the kit, go watch that video. And also if you want to go much faster than all of the aero stuff that people geek out about all the time, like for free in less than 5 minutes,
Yeah,
go
I'm
check
one of
out
the
that video.
culprits in that video.
Yeah, I
Having
did.
like this awfully pinned. I have an excuse at least. Like I have a disability. Most other people, like I'm like, come on, guys. Like I have an
And
excuse.
you made sure to say that Cade pinned your number, so
Oh,
it's
for
kind of
sure.
on Cade.
Yeah,
But
Cade's only been racing for a year, so he
uh,
has a lot to learn.
this is why I make these videos. It took me 10 years to figure out how to pin a number like that. But if someone had told me early on, you gotta use way more numbers than you think you do, and you gotta go in a circle, pull it tight, use your legs, all that stuff. I
Yep.
probably would have had a few. I don't know about better results, but certainly like easier days in some really long races early on.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's one thing people miss out about like marginal gains is that like if it saves you 2 watts, like you have a finite amount of kilojoules that you can ride per hour before you implode, right? And if something is saving you amount of watts to go a certain speed, that's kilojoules you're saving over the course of that hour. So you can like
right.
ride that much harder. That's the way I perceive it or explain it at least.
Yeah, I also think that people don't realize that whether you're drafting or not, like aerodynamics still have an effect. So
Yeah,
even if you're in the draft, if you've got a sail on your back, that's going to be harder to stay in the draft than if you didn't.
yeah, for sure.
Um, well, that's stuff I noticed at some local races, but that's where we're going to start local and go national. We're also going to start now and then go back in time. Since our last episode was all about NCL, we've got plenty of non-NCL stuff, kind of a backlog to talk about and get through. A lot of racing in America. This last weekend, everybody was kind of spread out. It was a lot of local racing. There wasn't one big central thing, but we did see a lot of the national teams kind of like racing in their own regional stuff. Our local crit series, I just got to shout this out too. Our local crit series started up a week ago yesterday, a week ago tomorrow. I don't know, a week ago Thursday. Temple of Zoom, really excited about those races, and we had a couple kids from the EF Education First development team out there. One of our dudes, Alex, got on the podium, but really high quality race here locally.
Yeah, we have a pretty decent talent pool in our little community, and so like I can tell you that I did like in the A race 280 watts average for that 45 minutes, which is right around 4.2 watts per kilo for me. So like crazy fast, hard racing for a local race. Like it was super exciting to like just have a hard race and like have to race it, you know.
Yeah,
And those EF kids are super strong.
yeah,
Um,
it's awesome to have that in town and to have those guys. That race would have been even harder. It got postponed for weather, but it would have been even harder had it been the week before because a bunch of the Milligan guys, including Ama Insik, national champion, were in town and signed up. So that would have been that would have been a
yeah,
ridiculous race.
That would
But
have
I
been
think,
a national race in
yeah,
like a parking lot in Birmingham, Alabama.
right. I mean, it already was pretty national with a couple of EF kits, EF development team kits out
Yeah.
there.
And
But
the junior development, want to specify that it's the junior development. So like
yeah,
EF has like a pipeline now. So where a lot of UCI World Tour teams will have an under 23 feeder team. So EF now has the junior feeder team that feeds into the under 23 that feeds into the World Tour team. To
yeah, that
clarify what EF we're talking about.
right. Yeah, it wasn't Lawson Craddock out there or anything, but although, as these races start coming up across the country, you do see him at like driveway sometimes. But speaking of like Ama Insek and the Milligan guys, they were out at Northbeast, right? I
Yeah.
think they did the collegiate stuff out there. So this
Yep.
past weekend, a bunch of the guys on our team went out to the Northbeast Classic, which is not a new race, but that's a new name for that race. What did that used to be called?
No, so that race weekend is replacing the Georgia Tech weekend.
Oh,
So
got it.
that
So it is a
so
new race.
what the thing there is, so Tour of North Georgia, Tonga, they are using some of the old Tonga courses that Tonga doesn't use now.
Gotcha.
So the Habersham County High School course and whatever crit course they use used to be Tonga courses, and now they're just reusing those courses.
So some of our guys were out at this race, but the big story here is that Ride Bikes just like absolutely destroyed Matt Govero, who we have mentioned on this podcast pretty consistently, won the GC. I also like from looking at their pictures here, noticed that Lucas Strain, who I raced with a decent bit last year, but really strong guy, really strong track racer. He's also on Ride Bikes this year, so they're getting out there early and getting some wins, but it looks like they're poised to continue upping their game this year.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
they've been one to look out for. We kind of mentioned it earlier this year. Like they're a team, they're going to be a sleeper team this year, and I think they're proven to punch a little bit above their weight already.
yeah, I think so. This they ripped that North Beast race apart. There were a lot of really strong guys that like
Yeah,
we were in our team's group chat talking about how the race was going for our guys, and you said you were seeing multiple strong riders like uploading their Strava files before the race was over, so you could kind of like
yeah,
see in real time like who was getting spat and heading back to the car, and it
yeah.
was all
Like
because Ride Bikes was doing it.
yeah, and I want to point out to also add legitimacy to the result. If you click that picture there, the guy in like the high vis jacket on the podium picture, Matt Winstead, he is like a Masters like 35 to 40 or 40 to 45 age group national champion this year for like the time trial. So the race they had in Albuquerque, he won that one, the national championship. So to add
Nice.
some legitimacy to that podium, like you have right, Matt and Brock from Ride Bikes, and you have like an active national champion on that podium as well. And then in third, Paceline Project is one of those like really strong like 1-2 teams that are local that just like rip a lot of our local races apart. So
Yeah, you're
really
definitely
stout
gonna
podium.
see like Paceline Project is gonna have a full squad at like Twilight, Sunny King, a lot of the Southeast like Pro 1-2 level stuff. Always a really strong squad. They normally dominate Georgia Cross too, which is a really strong series. While we're on just like kind of giving shout outs to sort of the localish races that happened and the people who won, Davey Dawson, who was on this YouTube channel about a year ago, basically doing like the proto version of what this podcast would become, just kind of talking about the American racing scene. He races for Automatic Racing, has for a few years, but he got a win out at Randall's Island, which is the recurring, basically like the New York City CBR equivalent, like the recurring weekend crit. So he's been coming back from injury, and a lot of strong guys there as well. Good guys racing with a big squad, a team that you would recognize from USA Crits or ACC more recently. But Yeah, big win for him. Good to see him coming
Yeah.
back from all the injuries he's had.
Yeah. I guess it's confirmed that Automatic is on BMC this year based off that bike picture.
Yeah. They definitely are.
Don't those don't those New York races start like ungodly early? Like
No, you're thinking of those are the weekday ones. They have
okay.
weekday ones in one of the parks. It might be they might have them in Prospect Park and Central Park, but there are definitely park races that are like weekday races that start at like I don't know, 5 a.m., 4 a.m., like before the sun is up sometimes, which is
Yeah. No thanks.
insane. No, these are out on Randall's Island, which is
Gotcha.
a little bit out from the city. For any like, real YouTube heads, that guy Claudio Marquez has some videos from these races. It looks like a fun course. I really like you can sort of see it in the background of the picture we're looking at here. I really like how this course is like a paved course and there's no curb on the sides. So it's kind of a meandering crit course, but if you totally blow one of these corners, you can just roll off into the grass that is like flush with the level of pavement. I feel
Yep.
like a lot of cities, ours included, would benefit from just in some park, just like pave a little loop. Just pave like a here's the real thing. Pave a 2.5K loop in your park, flush at grade, no curbs, and then make it a dedicated exercise loop. You can run bike races on it whenever, you can run crits on it whenever, and it's like super safe for low stakes crit racing to kind of let people get their skills up. And then you can also just do 2 laps of it as a 5K. So like if you want to have a 5K series, that's where the money's at. People love a 5K.
There's a 5K every weekend in Birmingham. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, if you want to make your investment back, just run like a city produced 5K like every 2 weeks, and you'll have
exactly.
200 people every other Saturday racing it.
That is what I'm trying to sell to Temple of Zoom. So we've got a dedicated the city basically bought an old Shriner temple, and that's where we're running these. That's why it's called Temple of Zoom, these races. But I'm trying to pitch to the city of Irondale that they need to invest in a 2.5K loop when they do. Their plan is to redevelop that area as like a sports recreation community center type zone. And I'm like, look, just put a 2.5K paved loop on there.
Yep.
While we're moving through the races, sort of localish stuff, the confusingly named American Cycling, which is the new team that sort of took the half of Best Buddies that didn't go to an NCL team or a Legion adjacent team, sort of the other half of Best Buddies, and then picked up some guys from the Emmanuel Eberry, so some of the South and Central American guys, but it's called American Cycling. I guess that's an all-inclusive America, but they had a race down in Miami over the weekend that they seems like they just crushed. I think they were definitely won the race, but maybe had 2 or even 3 guys on the podium there.
They lapped the field.
Okay.
Like, so like I guess they like as a team collectively got away and nobody was able to pull them
Ooh.
back. So like they lapped the field and then like just all were on the podium. So yeah,
Ooh.
like dominated. I mean that's all you can say when
So,
that happens, right?
right, and it's not like there was nobody there. It looks like so we're looking at their Instagram post. One of their guys posting up. They're also on BMC, so I guess BMC is going all in on American crit racing. Apparently BMC has gone from the choice bike of the like time trialing dentist to they're trying to position themselves as the American crit bike now. I don't know. I feel like Specialized Delay and the CAD 13 kind of have the market cornered on that for real, but
They're gonna
I
need an aluminum
appreciate
bike.
BMC for
Yeah.
trying. Yeah,
They're gonna need like a $2,500 aluminum bike and then like they'll win the whole market.
right, totally. I honestly no, the thing that will win the crit bike market is the first one of these companies to make a aggressive geometry. So like an Allay aluminum bike and spec it with a mechanical Chinese group set. Because those
Yeah.
things work. I mean, especially the like Sensa, and they're so cheap. Like if you fall and bust a Sensa shifter, it's like it's no big deal. Just grab another one. It's probably less than $100 for a single shifter.
Yeah. Maybe that's like an off-season episode we do where we like collectively just like build a crit bike for like a beginner or something. Like maybe that's
Yeah,
like an off-season episode where we just nerd into like all of the like super affordable options that only someone who's like been involved in this for like a million years knows about.
right. Yeah, I love that. So everybody bookmark that in your mind. Off season, when that comes back around, we're coming back to that. I do want to mention here. We're looking at this photo. There's a little bit of shade in the comments. It looks like it's not a thing where the pro team showed up to the local crit and just lapped up because there was nobody there. It looks like Danny Estevez, who's on the other Miami team, Miami Blazers, not the Miami Knights from NCL, but Danny. So the caption says, separating the men from the boys, and Danny Estevez says, "I guess I'm a boy," laughing, sweating emoji. But
Oh gosh.
I guess that means Danny Estevez was there. But little bit of shade there, but it seems like that's all in good fun.
Yeah, I mean like he was probably solo.
Right.
And then like you have like
Which
two or
is
three
weird
guys. Yeah, it's like
because he's on a Miami quote unquote team, but most of those guys don't live in Miami.
yeah. So if he's solo and then it's like, oh well you're in the Blazers kit, like you're the one doing the work now. And so that's one of those things where like politics in the Peloton and like team dynamics end up working against a solo rider because like
Yep.
he may have been solo, but because he was wearing a particular team kit, people were like, I'm not working with you.
Yeah. Everybody knows who he is, and everybody knows that he's strong. So they're not going to let him get away. And then he doesn't have teammates to set him up or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm realizing what is weird to me about the American cycling name. It's that American cycling, I think, has more guys that live in Miami than Miami Knights or Miami Blazers. And then Miami is the only city that has multiple crit teams with the city name in the name.
That tracks. Yeah.
So that's all.
That's a weird dynamic, but yeah, that totally tracks.
Yeah, that's a whole weird. Somebody fact check me on there. Somebody
also,
in the
like,
chat.
But even at that point, Miami is not like a crazy race hub either. Like,
Right.
it's like this weird thing where it's like, if
I mean,
it was,
they have a scene in Miami, but it's also
yeah,
not like it's not the hotbed. It would make more sense if it was like two teams from Boulder or something.
right, or even Los Angeles or whatever. Like, just the
Yeah.
Miami thing, like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because they don't have like a huge national level race scene there.
Yeah, there used to be guys from the team that was sponsored by Chinelli. I think they were called Rush at some point. I think they changed
Yeah,
they changed titles a couple of times, but they used to come up to like Tour of North Georgia and stuff to race, which always made me think there must not be, because I would not drive like 10 hours out of Florida if there was racing I could do somewhere on the Florida,
yeah,
that made me think that they didn't have a ton of racing. If they were coming up to our like, Tour of North Georgia is a good race, but it's not like you're making the drive for Athens or something, I expect people to like fly in for that.
right, yeah. But I mean, like that's why we don't go to Florida to race is because why would I drive 6 hours to Gainesville when I can go 45 minutes to Sumatonga or
Right.
whatever? Like, yeah. So they at least when rush cycling was a thing, there wasn't a whole lot of racing.
Yeah.
Just how it is.
Yeah. It's I had something else on that, but I've lost it. But I'm going to move on to CBR. We had another CBR, which a bunch of people sent me this. So I think, we're not the only ones paying attention to CBR. Shout out also to Ray Mars, who's doing these streams on his channel. He's been like engaged and commenting on these videos, but the production on these is like getting better and better every week.
Yep.
But so Legion was out at the CBR this week, and shockingly, surprisingly, Legion got upset. It looked to me like they had two or three guys in here, and we were debating. Ben and I both like watched the finish, and we're like, trying to figure out who was who before the results had come out. We weren't sure if it was CJ or maybe Dante who did the lead out, but they didn't have a full squad. We haven't seen Legion like kind of all together in one place yet, but they had multiple people, and they kind of got rolled.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, this guy Chris Hildreth, who's on Team Six, which I immediately sent it to Ben and was like, "Hey, some random dude on some team I've never heard of, just beat Corey in a heads up sprint," which I think was a fair qualification of what happened. I don't know. You watched it. What did you think?
Well, I only watched it. So like when you texted me, I was like sorting firewood or something. And I looked and I saw it and I like immediately stopped and like watched it. And yeah, it was like a pretty much a heads up group sprint. Now there was like a little bit of weirdness because there was a break that came back in that last lap. So like I don't know if there was a little bit of confusion with that maybe going on, but like by the time it was 250 meters to go, it was pretty straightforward, a group sprint. And Chris, yeah, just rolled over the top of Corey. I mean, just that simple.
Yeah, so there was a break of like two riders on the same team in the last lap. And then Legion, like I said, they didn't have as many guys, but they burned someone, I think maybe Justin, to pull that back. And then they didn't have a full lead out for the finish. We're watching it right now, though. That was pretty much just a straight up sprint. This dude
Yeah.
from Team Six just, I mean, he kind of did the impossible there. We've seen for years every team is trying to go head to head with Legion. So immediately we're like, who is Team Six? They're sponsored by YouTube TV. They were formerly like an elite masters team, and they've just kind of like moved up a level to like a, what did you say, like pro Conti, or like a
Yeah,
level
like
below that, like US, like elite or
domestic
something.
elite or something.
Domestic
Yeah.
elite, yeah.
But like I was like, who is this guy? And I kept doing more research and I figured out. So Chris Hildreth, his handle on Instagram is window licker with no vowels, like the Aphex Twin song.
Right.
And he's got like several viral reels. Like he runs onboard cameras and just like his reels are just showing like crit chaos. Like not
He's like a
like
track
crash
guy.
porn.
Is he like a
Yeah.
crash guy? I mean, sorry, a
No,
track guy?
maybe. But like he's not showing like crash porn. He's just showing a lot of like bumping and moving around. Like this is very hectic and he's got several viral reels. So like that kind of like immediately was like, okay, like this is like super legit. Um and it's just crazy to see like that kind of result. 'Cause I know he's been racing for a while.
Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, that's like, I don't think that this is, I'm not saying this to be like, oh, Legion is like off their game and like Corey's terrible right now or something. This is one of the things I like about cycling, though, is that like, sometimes the pawn can beat the king in the correct scenario. Things set up just right for them, and I think maybe Team Six was benefiting from being a new team and no one recognizes the kit, or like a new iteration of a team that's been around. They're kind of like stepping up a level.
Yeah.
So I think they were maybe benefiting from the fact that like people were, I don't want to say not chasing him, but yeah, that was awesome to see. That's one of the things I love about cycling, is that it is like, it's possible to have like a crazy upset if you get all of the timing right and a little bit of luck falls your way and you're really strong. But I think this feeds into something we were kind of talking about in the green room, which is that Legion, they've got kind of we haven't seen them all in the same place the way that we've seen all these other teams, even if they're not doing the biggest races like ride bikes. They're like fielding squads that are full squads at some of these smaller races, kind of tuning up. I think what we're seeing here is that Legion is looking at a lot longer of a season than some of these other teams. Like, I don't think Legion has kind of like early season goals.
Yeah. It just seems like maybe they start picking up really racing in May. Probably like
Yeah,
maybe Speed Week is when they all form together finally. Because the CRT thing, which is
yeah,
secret, like we know it's the Legion thing, even if it's not announced, right? Like
yeah.
officially yet.
To
Like
go
that's in
back to
October.
Right. If people haven't listened to our sort of like crit season preview episodes, our first couple of episodes, C CRT, we don't even know what it like stands for, but that's the rumored. There are dates floating around, and there's something that was shared to us from multiple different sources that are. It's the same note that has the same dates, all labeled as CRT. There's supposedly new races that are all like the next extension of the Into the Lion's Den race thing, and they're all like extremely late in the season. They're
Yeah,
like cyclocross season basically, like
yeah.
October.
It's like the last 2 weeks of September and last few weeks of October. Like it's crazy late, and like it's
It's
March,
too
almost
late. I'm gonna
April.
say
Yeah,
that.
I
That's
I
cyclocross
agree.
season. Get out of there.
I
Step off.
I agree. But it's like if you're a Legion and that's your series, you're obviously gonna peak in October for that series,
Yeah.
and it's April. Like
Right.
there's no reason for them to be even racing that hard yet. So
Yeah. And
it's not. Yeah,
when we first talked about that, my theory was that maybe we would see them early season and then they would kind of like dip out in the hottest part of summer and come back like they would almost do two peaks, but it seems like that's not what they're going for. They're going to try to do a much slower build this year into um, their own series, which still has not been officially announced, but
yeah.
I don't know. We'll
There
we'll see.
seems like they're all in on that. And I mean, even Austin Aviators like just did a team camp last week. So I mean,
Right.
they're just now like starting to put together everything
Yeah.
congenial. Right?
And
Yeah.
Aviators is like the new. There was Legion of LA, and then there was Miami Blazers, and now there is Austin Aviators. So this is their kind of slow ramping up, building these teams up to having an entire league of, kind of the same thing as NCL, where they want to have teams with like geographically based teams, like other sports leagues that like are in the same league or whatever, like are competing against each other. The weird thing, and this may also be true of NCL, I don't know yet because we're not going to go deep on NCL this time, but the frustrating thing about NCL is that it's all very vague. But at least with Legion, like all the teams are owned by the same group, which includes
Yeah.
people from Legion. So it's like if Tom Brady owned four NFL teams and was still quarterbacking. Like it's a weird it's a weird setup.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is it's a vibe where it's like they like you're not gonna chop the guy who writes your paycheck, like so it's
Yeah.
this weird like Legion is still like the head dog, like you're not gonna see like Aviators or Miami Blazers like sort of deliberately like overtake and like race them aggressively, but
And maybe they will in their own series, but I didn't feel like we saw like we last year we didn't really see the Blazers train battling the Legion train the way that we saw Best Buddies battling the Legion train.
right.
But we saw Blazers there, but they were kind of just like waiting for an opening to open up. If it did, they weren't. So I'm excited this year. Blazers is still a thing, but a lot of the guys who were on Blazers last year have moved over to NCL teams, most notably like a Clever Martinez. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to see like a completely not even just off the leash, but like promoting series that are at odds with each other and then racing in national races that are not part of either series against each other, like fully head to head.
I think there's going to be some like crazy tension there. Like
Yeah.
part of me is really excited to watch them go head to head because there's going to be like the Denver Disruptors train and the Miami Knights train and the Legion train all like going like trying to go three wide into corners. Like I think that we're going to see that sort of dynamic, and that's really exciting to me is seeing like a bunch of teams riding super aggressive and super hard. Not aggressive in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like when your basketball coach says be aggressive, like that sort of like be motivated. Like that sort of dynamic where you don't have one team just drilling it the whole time is like I think going to make crit racing this year way more interesting and exciting to watch than it has been the last 2 years.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to see. I'm really most excited to see the races that are like not NCL and not CRT, so that we see teams from both of those leagues, so that we're seeing like Legion, Blazers, Aviators, Miami Knights, uh, Denver Disruptors, and Automatic Racing. Like it's gonna be that's
Yeah.
gonna be like where the Venn diagram completely overlaps, and we really have. So like the existence of NCL and CRT is making me more excited for ACC races.
Oh, right. That's the thing. It's like a rising tide, like lifts all ships kind of thing, where
Yeah,
Legion, Legion doing what they did, raised the level and professionalism of crit racing to an extent that teams had to catch up. Now
yeah,
I think we're getting to a point where teams are, if not caught up already, starting to catch up. And I think we're going to see this year where Legion's not as dominant and like teams are able to compete with their train and like actually like just being more of a race and like just being more aggressive, like sort of back like in that you remember that gray area like after the blue train with
yeah,
UHC and before the Legion train where
yeah.
you'd get these crazy breakaways
Yeah,
and
racing was super exciting in
yeah,
that little period. Like you could have that was when you could have like a freelance Frank Travieso lap the field solo or something. Just like
right.
wild kind of anything could happen at any point racing, and it's going to be more like that this year.
Yep.
Also, like again, we're not going to go super into NCL this time, but we do have to mention that our last episode was all NCL. We had Gabe Mendez from Miami Knights on. Shout out Gabe. Shout out to NCL for letting us have him on. We kept asking like, what are we allowed to ask him about? We don't want to be like, we wanted to put the hard questions to him, but
Yep.
we also we didn't want to like say stuff that we were gonna have to edit out later or something. And they were
Right.
cool about it. They let us say whatever. So,
Yeah.
big ups.
There wasn't a
Yeah.
single thing that we had to take out. Like we were like, hey, this is the podcast and their media guy was like, thumbs up, this is good.
Yeah.
Put it out.
There were
Like
some
so
questions
shout
that
out.
Gabe couldn't answer, but
Yeah.
that's fair. We were asking some things I didn't expect him to be able to answer. But the day after we put out that podcast, they released this new website. So scrolling around on the new website, we gave them a lot of guff for their old website. This one does look a little bit better. It looks pretty pro. It's got a little bit more clarity around like who the sponsors are and stuff. There's not really any information here though that like I think the podcast we did last time with Gabe had more like actual information than this new website does, other
Yep.
than something that I made a post about on this channel, which is that the races are going to be on GCN. So we've been questioning where and how we would be able to watch these. We're going to be watching them on GCN. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to buy a GCM Plus membership now.
how many people can log in at the same time? I'll give you mine. Can I say that on the podcast?
That's gonna do the Netflix thing. GCN's gonna ban your account now.
Yeah, I don't know what the limits on the GCN like how many logins you can have at the same time or whatever, what the parameters are. The only other thing I wanted to mention about NCL, and I think we kind of like touched on this in the past because the schedules of the teams were already out there, is that the the two endemic teams to NCL don't have identical schedules. Obviously, both of them are doing all the NCL races, but other than that, like only one of them is going to Speed Week, only one of them is going to Tour of America's Dairyland, I think. But the way
Yep.
they've done it, we talked about this like in the green room or whatever, just like on text. That's kind of what this podcast is. It's like stuff that we would normally just text about, and I'm like, we should talk about that on the podcast.
Yep.
Uh, their schedules overlap in a way that neither team is doing all of the ACC. And I assume if they're allowed at CRT, the Legion series, that'll be the same. Like neither team will do the entire. So they're like getting the benefit of having NCL teams represented at all of those like established races because ACC does have the most established historic races of any of the series. They've got your Athens Twilights, your Salt Lake Cities, that kind of stuff. Um, so they're getting the benefit of having their teams there, but they're not giving ACC the like season long sort of like story arc benefit of having consistent teams. So I wonder if that's going to be a next step for ACC. And I know that was a goal of USA Crits, and they actually had to back it down a few years ago. But to like close those races off and say like once you're in the league, you're in the league. And I think that's what everyone is building to. But it's a question of who's
Yeah.
going to get there first, like a sort of like closed. Like the NBA only has so many teams. Like I can't start a basketball team and go into the NBA,
Right.
and it's not even like football, like European football where there's a relegation system. It's those leagues are like it's a league and these are the teams and this is the structure. I think that's what all of the cycling leagues are trying to get to, except for
Mhm.
ACC maybe.
I think maybe so. Like you're gonna know this reference because you live here and we're big with the football thing in Alabama. So like you have the NFL, and then there's a completely unrelated, same rules to the sport league, the XFL, and like Birmingham has an XFL team, right?
No, that's called okay, it used to be XFL. It's the new one is a different thing, AFL.
AFL. Okay, yeah. So NFL and AFL.
XFL was the '90s one that was like it was like real life NFL Blitz where it was like
Oh shit. Okay, yeah,
it
you're
was the
right.
guy from wrestling. What's Vince McMahon? It was like his. We did have an XFL team though, the Birmingham Bolts. Which if
That
anybody
track
finds
for
like Birmingham
Birmingham.
Bolts
Yeah.
merch on eBay, send me a link. But
So okay, yeah. Okay, so NFL and AFL, like same like team size and dynamics and everything, but same sport, different league that operates on a whole separate like the AFL is not a feeder to the NFL, right?
yeah, they're just
So, so
wholly
we're
separate entities.
that's what we're going to end up seeing between NCL and CRT is like, and what's going to happen is eventually, like kind of what you're suggesting, I think is you're either going to be bought into the NCL or bought into CRT, and you're not going to be able to do both. Like unless you just
I'm
have the budget
yeah.
to pay for both or however that ends up
See, I
working.
think we're gonna get to a
But
point where they're gonna make them mutually exclusive. Like they're gonna make it a deal where you're like paying up front to be this is what USA Crits was like working toward. I know. There was a year where USA Crits was doing a thing where like if your team wants to be a USA Crits team, you have to pay the fee to be a USA Crits team, but that includes your race entries. It also includes like housing that they were setting up,
okay,
some kind of travel stipend or something. But I think you had to do a certain number of their races to be a part of that deal, or at least like it would behoove you to do them because you had already paid for them. And if you were freelancing, if you were not on one of those teams, you couldn't just show up that day and sign up for the pro race. There was a Pro 1-2 race or even Pro 1-2-3 something, but that was separate from the like league race. So a lot of
okay,
Cat 1 guys got mad because they were like, I'm just as good as whoever and I got to race the scrub race with me. They were mad they had to race my race. I was mad they had to race my race. I don't want to
yeah,
race them.
right, right,
Um, but a lot of them got really mad, and I think that this was like the final year that USA Crits was a thing, so like 18 or 19. But I think they backed off that because so many high level guys who just like hadn't gotten, they were kind of on their own like privateer freelancing situation teams. They were, mad they couldn't race whatever it was, like
yeah.
Twilight, the premier race or whatever.
But I mean, that's what happens in other sports, though, right? So, like, I don't like you and I have had a I think it was in private a discussion, deliberation about this where we were talking about like individuals who were mad about not being able to participate in the USA Crits races because they weren't on a USA Crits team,
Yeah.
but they had their pro card or their one card.
Yeah.
Like in my opinion, which is a little bit different, like yeah, like it's a league. If you're not on a team that participates in the league, you don't get to race it, right? And I think it's sort of this. It creates a forced professionalism where like any of those 8 or 9 guys who didn't find a team could have like reached out to each other, come together, like they all have industry connections, like just like cobbled
Yeah, they could have
together
made a
team.
team.
They
Yeah.
could have done it and chose not to, right? Or
Right.
maybe they didn't actively choose not to, but you know what I'm saying. Like they didn't
Yeah.
do it. So it's like is like a forced professionalism aspect where it's like this is the
Yeah,
pro league,
it
be
also
in it or
makes it
not.
like uh not that people are not trying to get on teams. Obviously, like there are more people trying to get on teams probably than there are high level teams out there,
Yeah.
but it just makes it where those spots on those whatever 8 or 9 teams that are doing these leagues, and maybe it's more if there's like 8 or 9 teams in this league, 8 or 9 teams in this league, whatever, but like those spots are automatically kind of like elevated above, because right now like Cat 1 teams, the thing that separates them is their budget. Like what
Yeah.
sponsors do they have? But it could be a thing where maybe a team with a smaller budget is dedicating themselves to being like a California team is like, we're gonna be the CRT team. We're gonna be whatever Tehran Elite. We're gonna go in all in on CRT. And if you want to race CRT, you try to get on that team.
Yeah. I think that's a reasonable thing for the future.
Yeah, I could
'Cause,
see
like
benefit to that.
UCI World Tour, like you can't be a pro and just show up and race the Tour de France or Giro, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not a thing. But like nobody complains about not being able to do that, right? So
But
it's an expectation thing.
yeah.
So and there's the UCI Pro. So you have World Tour UCI Pro, which is like there's a new relegation battle where like you can be a UCI Pro team and get invited to a World Tour race, right?
Yep.
So like, and then there's UCI Continental, which same thing. A UCI Continental team can be invited to a UCI Pro race or however that ends up working.
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe
that's
these
a similar model that we feed to
yeah.
some of these leagues, right?
I actually really like a model where each of these races has like 2 wildcard spots, so they
Yeah,
can give whatever is sort of like the local elite team, kind of the way, your Nippo Vini Fantini or whatever, like weird little Italian team, always Bardiani CSF, like
yeah,
teams like that always get into the Giro, so they can kind of like race the biggest race in their home. I like that idea where it's sort of a closed league and there's like 1 or 2 wildcard spots per race, and they kind of go to whoever makes the most sense, be that like the high level local team or someone else who sort of petitions them. Like, maybe there's someone who makes the case that they're the Uno X of American pro racing, or American, they're like kind
yeah,
of a cut above all the other all the other teams that are on the same level with them, and they say, hey, we don't have the budget to be in any of these leagues, but we're close to this race and we would like to do this one. Give us the wild card.
yeah. I think that makes sense, and I think like as a long term thing, you just see like the level of teams and races get a little bit higher because if there's only 170 available slots to be a pro bike racer in America, then like
Or to be the
there's
American version of pro, which is like
yeah,
racing these crits. Yeah.
yeah, say
Whatever
that's
that is.
yeah. So like then you have rider 171, rider 172, 73 that are on that level but maybe didn't get a spot on a team that year, racing at
Yeah.
that next level down, which takes those ones and twos that are on that same team, riding with someone who's on that level, right? Building them up. And so you just kind of feed it, and I think that's a long-term goal to increase the level and professionalism that we kind of need to make crit racing sustainable long term in America,
To
right?
make it like desirable, like
Right.
to make it something that like exists on all levels. So I think, yeah, like the Temple of Zoom stuff on the very small local end has to exist to like get people pulled into the sport and excited about it, and then there it has to like funnel up. There has to be a complete funnel that goes up to this pinnacle that people are aspiring to
Yep.
in a way that like there's not kind of a complete path that exists right now. But so the talking about professionalism made me think of another thing I got on my agenda, which like has struck our team, or you know, as we're looking around for races to do, there's we're kind of going backwards in terms of professionalism with all these races that are multiple race events. They're 3 race weekends with like a road race, a time trial, and a crit, or a road race, a circuit race, and a crit, whatever it is. And they're not stage races, and they're not omniums. They're just multiple races that are disconnected for some reason. And I'm partially asking the chat right now, is that nationwide or is that a Southeast thing that's happening like in the last couple of years? Every race just no longer has a GC or no longer has an overall.
As the chat is kind of like, hopefully there's somebody in here acknowledging that. But
Yeah.
like what I'm noticing, like Auburn last year, it wasn't an omnium, but like even when it was an omnium, you'd go to the road race and there'd be 60, 70 people in every road race. And then
Yep.
7 to 12 people would sign up for the time trial, and then 60 or 70 people would show up for the crit the next day, right?
Yep.
So like there's a weird thing where no one wants to time trial. And so I think organizers, I want a time trial. That's the only thing I'm good
You know
at,
what?
right? So
I've turned around on that in the last couple of years. Like during COVID, when I think one of the only races that happened in Alabama in 2020 was the Sprott time trial. I like forced myself to get a little bit better. There's a video on this channel about it. Go back and watch it. But
yeah.
yeah,
But
I
like
forced myself to learn about time to become decent at time trialing. But I'm certainly guilty in the past of being the time trial skipper.
yeah.
But I guess in a world where we're still having the time trial, though, this is what's
That's
baffling to me.
yeah.
Is like we still have. It used to be that the impetus, the like, if you're not Ben, if you're like me and you're someone who doesn't necessarily love to time trial, or maybe doesn't have a time trial bike or whatever, the thing that would get you to do the time trial is the fact that it counted toward the overall. So if you did okay in the first race, even if you're a terrible time trialist, everyone would delude themselves and be like, oh, today's my day. I did all right. I can just hang in the time trial. And that's like why you would do the time trial, is to
Yeah.
get into the overall results.
So here's right. Here's where I'm thinking the disconnect is. If time trial results gave you upgrade points, I'd be a Cat 1 by now. Right? So like
Yep.
that's the issue. And so everybody right now, like, and I have this same opinion for everything across the board when it comes to leveling up and upgrading, whether you're in bike racing or you're in Boy Scouts trying to get your Eagle Scout. Like everybody is so focused on upgrade points right now. Getting to the
Yeah.
night, everyone I talk to is like, "Oh, I'm doing this race for points. I'm doing this race for
Right.
points, trying to get points."
I
And
mean,
so,
points are kind of the game, you know? Like
yeah,
that's the system of like amateur racing. That's
yep,
what you're it's like the RPG mechanic of it. That's how you're like that's your XP or whatever. That's your
right,
system of like
yeah.
gathering
Everyone's
something.
like, "I have 5 more points left to my Cat 3. I got 2 more
Right.
points left to my 2, or whatever it is." Right, and so so the time trial doesn't give you upgrade points, which I think is ridiculous because it's a true fitness test, right? Like if you can do 5.2 watts per kilo for 20 minutes, you don't need to be a Cat 5, right? Period. Unless you just can't corner a bike. But I mean, the then the Omnium doesn't give you upgrade points either. So by skipping the time trial, you're saving $30, and because there's no Omnium upgrade
Oh,
points anyways.
so there used to be Omnium upgrade points. Like when I was
Okay.
coming up through the, I'm a two now, and I have no desire to go to one because like most every race is a pro 1-2. I get to race with the pros and the ones all the time, and the few times they do separate it out to a two race, I need to be racing like the other guys that have full-time jobs. So I'm done
Yeah.
with this climb, so I quit kind of like paying attention to the system. But when I was coming up, like Omniums, I know stage races did, but I'm pretty sure also Omniums, like an Omnium finish was additionally like if you were there was a system, if like 50 people finished the Omnium and you were third, that was giving you points.
As far as I know, that's not the case anymore.
And
I could
this
be wrong
No, the whole
because
system has changed a couple
yeah.
of times since I came up as well. Um, yeah, Ray Mars mentioned him earlier, gave him a shout out earlier when we were talking about the CBR races, but he says the only stage race in SoCal other than Redlands just got downgraded to an Omnium. So they're on the same slippery slope that we are. We're just like farther down the
Yeah.
slope, I guess, on this coast.
But I'm not mad about amateur races being an Omnium because like we've had this conversation where if it's an Omnium and you have someone who's like a crazy big team like us or like someone who's abnormally fit can like go and take 2, 3, 4 minutes, right? And then because our courses aren't hard enough, there's no way to gain that time back. But in
Yeah,
Omnium, because it's points based, you can make up those points.
I think almost anything where one of the stages is a crit, like those normally benefit from being an Omnium rather than a
Right.
stage race. Again, with the exception of Redlands, there was that year at Redlands that what is his name? He's on Butcher Box now. He was on Legion. He was on Semper Poro before that. He was in I raced with him at last year in Nashville at the Nashville like weeknight crit.
Oh,
Cannot think of his name, but there was the year that he was on Semper Poro where he won Redlands by lapping the field in the crit, but like stage he lapped the field in a lapped short race, and that was how he
yeah.
took all of his time. But like that's the only time I can think of where in a stage race the crit result played into a significant like really large time difference that ended up deciding the GC. And
Yeah.
like that has stuck in my brain because it was such an outlier.
Right. So like that's where I think an Omnium is strong because it sort of levels the playing field a little bit
Corey
more.
Lockwood, thank you, Ray. That was driving me nuts. I kept
There we
going
go.
Corey and then Williams, and it was like that's not who it was. It was
I kept
another
thinking it was
Corey.
Tyler Williams too, and I was like, I know it's not Tyler Williams, and I was like, drawing a
Yeah,
blank. Corey
Corey
Lockwood, yeah.
Lockwood.
So like that's the thing. So Chainless TV is saying we have a few Omnium weekends in NorCal, but they're like optional Omniums. I think the promoters think more will reg if they don't need to do every stage.
Yeah,
That's the thing we're having the issue with is people because there's no like upgrade points for the time trial and no Omnium upgrade points. There's no motivator
there's no
to do it.
incentive to do the whole thing.
Yeah, there's not.
It's more money. It's more time invested. It's like cheaper and easier to not do that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Um, yeah, I that's just like a phenomenon it's been especially acute this year. Like a lot of races that used to be well, we're talking like in our group chat about like, oh, how did so and so race go that one of our guys went and did, and I'll ask who won the overall, and they're like, oh, there was no overall. Like that's probably been said 5 times this year.
Every race this year, there's
Yeah.
been there's no overall, and it's like there was 3 races. Like
Right, right.
those used to be Omniums.
Yeah. And it does seem like, especially if you're not, maybe promoters don't want to give an additional payout for the Omnium, but like you don't have to do that. If you gave points and no additional Omnium payout,
Yep.
people would do the Omnium for the points. And it's literally just just another line. Like the spreadsheet will do it for you. Like
Yeah.
Excel will just total that tally up.
I mean, think about it. Most Cat 4.5s, their sole goal is to get to threes so they can race in the Pro 1-2-3s and race like the big race. So that's the only thing. So if you provide that incentive early on, like, hey, if you get third in the Omnium, you're going to get 5, 6, 7 upgrade points.
Yep.
To go from 4 to 3, that's a third of your upgrade points for winning
Right.
an Omnium, right? So like that motivates people to do it because then, in theory, if you're super strong, you can get from 4 to 3 in one race weekend.
It's also like nobody is winning an Omnium by luck. Like you have to
Right.
put together multiple solid races and, you have to not crash, you have to not make a tactical mistake.
Yep.
So it makes sense to me that there would be some kind of like incentive or bonus to do that. All
Right.
right, I want to move on. We got like a couple more things on the list, and I every time I'm like, how are we going to make this an hour? And then I look up and we're almost at an hour already. But
Right.
it always happens. So we didn't get a chance to cover this Tucson Bicycle Classic because we talked about it a little bit with Gabe because they did it as part of their team camp. But yeah, Tucson Bicycle Classic, that was kind of the most together we've seen everybody. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what we saw there. Unsurprisingly, Project Echelon on top of the GC. Also, transition from our former topic, a race that actually is still a stage race does still have a GC.
Yep.
And I think that's why a lot of these teams made it one of their like, we're going to build our team camp around this race. We're actually going to like get ourselves there and do it as an early season tune up or focus or whatever because it's got a GC. It's like a real big race.
Yeah. Project Echelon going 1 and 3 in the GC, like that's not surprising. I think we kind of said in our preview, like it would take a crazy upset for Project Echelon to not win almost
Yeah.
every stage race
If
this
it's a
year.
stage race, yeah, Project Echelon is like the standard bearer. They're the team to beat in a stage race for sure this season.
Yeah. And then crazy enough, like we talked about the NCL, like yes, it's a crit format for the NCL races, but their teams are super stacked with like not crit endemic pros, and we see that
Right.
going second on the GC. Reinhardt, Jans, Van Rensburg. Hope I'm pronouncing
Yes.
that correctly. Um,
Close
so it's like
enough.
going second on the GC. He's not American. Um, he was on
He was on Quick
Lotto.
Step,
Yeah, he was on.
Lotto,
No, he wasn't on Quick Step. He was on MTN Quebeca.
Quebec.
And then when they folded, he was on Lotto Sudal. So like that was last year. So
And
they
now
were
he's on an
still a
NCL
World
team.
Tour team.
Yeah, he's going from World Tour to NCL.
Yeah.
So
Is a like in South Africa. He won the South African road race national championships in 2022, and then was second in the national road race championships this year. Has
yeah,
raced the Tour de France 6 times. Has raced the Vuelta 3 times. So like that's the thing is with the NCL bringing over some of these super talented pro like world tour level guys, you're going to see some of them kind of trickle into these GC results on some of
yep.
these bigger stage races.
Yeah. And then, like, speaking of the NCL stuff, so Denver Disruptors went 2-4 at this race. Both NCL teams did team camps that were kind of like based around this, doing this race as a part of the camp. And so Denver Disruptors went 2-4, and then Brian Gomez from Miami Knights was sixth. Um, Specialized Project 74 is a team that's like a California based team. Interesting to see them out there with a guy I don't know in the top 10. I'm just kind of glancing down to see
Yep.
who else. CS Velo had somebody in the top 10. Yeah, nothing else like super shocking there, but we are seeing the NCL teams like holding their own on in these races that are non NCL, which I'm going to move on from this, but did I say this already? I am going to be on the Criterium Nation podcast this
No, you
coming
did
week.
not.
I
Yeah.
did not say it. Yeah. Sorry, Rob. Yeah, so Criterium Nation is going to do a big NCL episode, and they have asked me to come on, I guess, in the wake of our NCL coverage, the Gabe interview. Again, if you want all of the actual info on NCL, go listen to our interview with Gabe, and then listen for me on Criterium Nation this coming. We're recording it tomorrow. I'm not going to put Rob on the spot for when it comes out, but the next episode of Criterium Nation, I will be on, and we will be going really in depth on NCL. The one other thing that we have to kind of like tie it all the way back to the first thing we talked about is that we had a couple of Americans in the top 10, also to tie it back to episode 4, a couple Americans in the top 10 at Paris Nice.
Yeah. So what we had was in the GC, we had Nielsen Palace rolling in 6th and Matteo Jorgensen rolling in 8th. And then in the final stage, like the hardest stage of the race, Matteo Jorgensen was 5th and Nielsen Palace was rolling on 6th. Like Paris Nice is one of 2 premier sort of Grand Tour prep stage races. It's you either go to Paris Nice or you go to Tirreno Adriatico to like prep for either the Giro or the Tour.
And all the big stars were at Paris Nice this year, I feel like.
Oh, for sure.
So that's even more. It's not like the field was as split as it sometimes is. Like Paris Nice was the premier race this year in terms of start list or whatever.
And I mean, even like Matteo was wearing the Young Riders jersey for a lot of the race too. Like,
yeah.
So to see Americans like sort of like at the top of the GC standings in a race that big is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
Especially one in the Young Riders jersey. Finally, someone not taking 7 years to figure out how to race in Europe.
Yeah.
So like the future's bright for Matteo. And
Yeah.
Nielsen's finally coming into his own and really taking that
EF
leadership
is
role.
finally coming into their own. Like EF is having a good season finally.
Yep.
So I said to like tie it back to the first thing we talked about, the local crit here in Birmingham, and we had some EF junior development riders. There is a pipeline now from that. Literally our Thursday night crit guys coming from that are like directly connected to, guys on an American based team that are going top 10 at Paris Nice.
Yep.
But it's like building that full connection that goes all the way up and not like losing people along the way.
Yeah. That's the thing is we're talking about funnels and pipelines, and that's a full pipeline end to end there, and then figuring out how to fill out that crit funnel. But just seeing like there's going to be a, I'm 16 and I'm really fast to getting into the World Tour. There's at least one solid pipeline out of America, which I don't think we've had in maybe ever. Like maybe the U.S. Postal days.
Yeah, definitely not. Since I've been, I literally like started racing right before Lance went on Oprah. So not since I've been racing has there been like a pipeline like that. Like Americans like competing at a high level and having kind of a robust like interest in racing, but then also success at the top European level. And I don't know. We talk about it in a couple of ways. I do think like something I talk about on this show a lot is I would like for it to be like for America to be in a place where going to Europe is like an option and a like style of career and not the only goal, where like America is a viable option and there is a type of racer that wants to stay in America and race in America, but also because that is such a big scene, we are creating guys who are capable of going world tour.
Yeah, that's the caveat that like we want to make clear is that we want like a distinct American style of racing to be sustainable and professional in America, but also have juniors and young racers who are strong the access to get to the world tour if that's what they want to do.
Right. I want it to be more about interest, like in that type of racing, like
Yep.
Grand Tour racing is what would drive you. Like we have a huge talent pool, and there are people who, from that talent pool, are like, I want to be a Tour de France racer, and then people who are like, I want to be a criterium racer.
Yep.
It's not like the crits are a stepping stone necessarily. They're more of a like talent ID, but also they can be their own thing. They can be their own end point. Kind of honestly the way that cyclocross sort of used to be for guys like Sven Ness. Like you used to be able to aspire to be a cyclocross pro without wanting to go World Tour road. That's what I would like to see American criterium racing be. Like you can have a good career doing that.
Yeah. I think we're I mean, with the three Legion teams doing what they do, I think they pay their riders a fair salary, allegedly, and the NCL teams paying their riders what they claim to pay is like aspiring to get to that level where crits do pay, right? Like
Yeah.
where crits can pay the bills and you can make rent racing crits. Like I think we're going to get there in 5 years.
Hmm.
And so like it's just right now we're in a weird spot where everything is going super professional, and eventually that's where the pay like we're making these investments now and the paychecks are going to come in 5 years.
Yeah. Hopefully, I hope they don't. I hope they don't all bounce at the same time. I think that's
Yep.
my worry with the oversaturation of like up to three leagues potentially like vying for the same spot. So we're live on YouTube right now. If you're just listening to the podcast, we're doing these live on YouTube with the exception of the last interview, which, Gabe had his own timetable he needed to be on, and we're glad to have him. But I do want to be able to engage with the chat a little bit more as part of this show. So we did have one question come in that I want to get to. Maybe we make this like a segment at the end of the show where, a good question that came in throughout. We'll answer it kind of last thing before we sign off. Joe's Guitar Shop asks, last half lap in a crit, how do you stay ahead of the swarm and keep position in the top five? I would say, well, if it's the last half of the lap and you're in the top five, you've already done the hardest part, because getting position, really like starting to think about it up to like 5 laps to go and find your position is the hardest part. But the swarming, the last half of the lap when the swarm happens, you just didn't start your sprint soon enough. Like
Yeah.
if people are quote unquote swarming you in the final half of one lap, that's just a long sprint. That's not really a swarm, I would say.
I guess like the question like what are they struggling with, right? Are
Yeah.
they struggling to get in position? Like are they struggling to hold the wheel
See,
or
to me
like
it's
follow that wheel, or are they
yeah.
struggling with the power output to hold that wheel once everyone starts swarming up and starting their sprint?
I've had this experience. It sounds like they are in position, maybe, you know, second wheel back, but kind of in the middle, and then swarms, essentially like a big group of people comes over one shoulder or the other, and because they're kind of locked in place, they don't have the ability to jump. If the person in front of them doesn't jump, they're kind of like getting jumped by like a proper lead out train in the finale. And what I would say
Gotcha.
there is you kind of have two options. One is that you need someone else, you need a teammate or someone else who's willing to set you up and be that person who's making the swarm, and you have to be on the wheel that will be the one swarming. And if you're freelancing, you do just have to say like who am I getting swarmed by, and find them, like base your positioning in the finale. If you're racing locally, racing the same people over and over, you have to like identify what the swarm is every time, or who are generally present in that, and then get on them. Like your
Yeah.
position in that finale doesn't need to be I need to be fifth wheel. It needs to be I need to be on the train of the people that continually are swarming me in the last lap.
Yeah,
And
because if you're following someone like me in the last half lap, I'm really good at being fourth wheel and then finishing in like 15th. Like
yeah,
I'm not the guy to be like, oh, I'm fifth wheel behind this guy. Like
right.
find the guys who are winning the races and just stick to their wheel. Like
Yeah.
that's the answer.
Ben is getting position and holding position, but when the sprint goes, he's going backwards. So if you're on the wheel of a bin, like you did a good job choosing the wheel to get you there, but you need to you need to shift over one to the right or left before it really goes off. The other
And
thing
part
I
of
would say
that.
is
No, go
you
ahead.
might need to just reevaluate like the type of rider you are. You might need to say maybe either you need to train your sprint, and if it is like a power thing and you just don't have that pop to go against guys that are like pure out and out sprinters, uh, or maybe you need to train it, or you just don't have it and you need to rethink like maybe you are the like kind of two to go flyer guy. Like
Yeah.
you're the guy where when everyone's kind of jostling but no one wants to lead it out, you shoot off the front solo and hope to stick it. I mean, Rob on our
Rob
team
on our
had
team
six.
is the king of
Yeah,
that.
he had success with that
He
at
won
Athens
he
Twilight.
won like a 2-3 at Intelligentsia doing that.
Yep,
He won the Twilight Amateur Racer and Amateur Qualifier doing that.
amateur qualifier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like you got to figure out how you're able to win races. Like for me, like I'm a TT power guy. Like I know if I go to the last 200 meters to go and I'm with somebody else, I'm going to lose that race because my sprint is all of 950 watts. So it's like I have to like find a way to get into that
you have
solo.
to get
Otherwise, I'm losing.
separation before that.
Yeah. So you got to figure out like if you're not a sprinter, if you don't have those white muscle fibers to produce that kick, you need to get a break and do a one lap fly or something, right? But like if you don't have that crazy 1 minute or you don't have that TT power, then you've got to figure out okay, who's winning the races, who's can you know leading out, who's going fastest. Because like yeah, you're fourth wheel, but if the guy to the left is coming up, maybe you just move to the left a little bit and sort of like get that draft really quick. I've done that before. Like you just
Yep.
or it could be just a general timidness too. Like I've coached guys who have a 1400-watt sprint at the end of a crit, but they were afraid to rub shoulders. They were afraid to bump elbows. And so they weren't getting results because they were too timid. So it
Yeah.
could be that too.
Yeah, for sure. And we're not saying you get out there and like smack into people, but you also like you hold your space and you know like this is me, this is where I am, and I'm when it goes fast, I'm gonna go fast. I think a lot of people wait for the race to happen to them, and when it gets fast, it just kind of like there's 2 or 3 seconds of them deciding if now is the time or whatever, and that's enough for it to be the end. I
Yeah.
know the asker of that question I know has watched a bunch of videos on my channel, but I will say for anyone else, go back and watch a bunch of my crit videos. I kind of talk through my thinking of all of these things, all of these situations in various. I got a crit playlist on here you can go back and watch, which I hope to be adding to. I've still technically got a separated shoulder. I can ride outside now, so that's a step in the right direction. But
Sweet.
yeah, I'm not supposed to be. I can't fall on it, or else I'm gonna have to get surgery for another month or two. So I'm gonna, yeah,
All
hoping to
right.
be back out there
Yeah.
like mid season this year. We'll see. Um,
Jeez.
yeah. So thanks everybody for hanging out. Check me out on the Criterium Nation podcast if you want to get one. I guess we're gonna have one more episode before the first NCL race, right?
I
Let me
think
look at the calendar.
yeah,
Ooh, our
it'll be the
yeah,
like 3 days before.
yeah.
So
So there's going to
perfect
be
timing.
plenty of NCL talk probably, or there's also a world where NCL releases like zero more actual information between then and now. So we may have another episode where we just pull up the NCL website and say they've made some posts and stuff, but none of them contain information.
They're doing this sales tactic where you give somebody just enough information to say yes to an appointment, and then but like not give them any actual real information for them to make a decision before you actually get
Right.
an appointment. So like it'll be this weird thing where I'm hoping they like put all their cards out by April 5th so we have all the information. What I would really like to see is like they go, okay, hey, these are the 8 other squads that are competing, so we can actually do like a preseason analysis and like analyze the teams and stuff before then, so
Yep.
we can actually do like a true like NCL deep dive preseason review before it actually happens.
Yep. Well, listen for me on Criterium Nation this week. We'll be talking some, and I think Rob's got some insider info, so maybe we'll learn some stuff there, and hopefully we'll learn even more before our next episode. But thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for hanging out. We'll see you guys next time.